For the past few years, a week or so before Christmas, our next door neighbors have placed a 3-foot tall and 5-foot wide sign in their front yard. The sign features green wooden cutouts of letters spelling joy. Above the O is a white star, and within the otherwise empty space of the O is a manger, beside which appears what we can assume are the shapes of Mary kneeling and Joseph standing over their baby. The sign in their yard stands out not only because they light it at night, but because it proclaims, perhaps more than any other lights and Christmas season figurines on our street, one of the true reasons for the season, the joy represented in a holy birth. I've been intrigued by this sign since the first time I saw it. Some years I've seen it as a gentle reminder, yes, this is a joyful time of year. Sometimes I've seen it as a command. No matter how frazzled you get, you better not forget the joy. And sometimes I've seen it as a warning. You'd better not miss the J-O-Y or you'll be S-O-R-R-Y. Despite the different ways the sign has spoken to me over the years, I've always seen its joyful message as an oddity. You see, my neighbors have never struck me as being so devoutly religious that they would choose to place a joy sign in their front yard at Christmas. They're not the type to make this kind of public proclamation of emotion on any matter, especially a religious one. They're not the declarative type. They're friendly, unassuming, mostly quiet. They aren't the kind to suggest to others what to do. Often, they won't even give us advice when we ask for it. For them to have a sign that all but screams joy in their yard, well, it just doesn't fit. So I never really knew what to make of their sign until last week, when the truth of the sign's origins unexpectedly emerged. My wife Susan and I were chatting with one of them, just making conversation, and we commented to her about the sign looking good. She kind of shook her head, and I sensed she might not share the joy her sign declared. She explained in a carefully managed voice that the sign was a gift from her adult son. They had been together one December night a few years ago, and she had commented within his earshot how lovely she thought a similar sign looked in someone else's yard. Her son, probably on the lookout for gift possibilities for his hard-to-buy-for mother, took note, and the following year, with pride and delight, presented her with her very own sign of joy, a sign that he had crafted with his own 2 hands. Of course, she was touched by the thought and the effort. It is a well-conceived, well-constructed sign, after all. And yet, for each of the Decembers since receiving that gift, she has experienced a bit of inner tension as she has felt obligated to put the sign in her yard, knowing that if she followed her preference and skipped it, her son would visit and wonder where the joy was. She admitted to us what I had already suspected. A big sign declaring joy does not really fit her seasonal aesthetic. And yet, she implied, honoring the gift of her son, despite the fact that the sign doesn't completely fit for her, would always be more important than her decoration tastes anyway. I loved hearing this story, and I told her so. I didn't go into detail about how the sign had confused me, how I too didn't think it fit her. Instead, I told her that knowing the story behind the sign gave it even more meaning for me. Now, I told her, I would see the sign with new eyes. And it's true. Each time I have caught a glimpse of those big green letters, since hearing the more detailed story behind them, I no longer see their message as a suggestion or a command or even a warning. I think of that sign as a reminder that prioritizing our relationships to one another, especially the relationships of our family, can be one of the most important meanings of any season. A meaning that may not feel like joy when we have to compromise our preferences or when we have to put someone else's feelings above our own. The joy sign now asks me to consider how I am honoring those who are most important to me. Am I clinging to any self-centered desires at the expense of my relationships? Can I be more accepting of the gifts my loved ones offer me, even those gifts I don't think I want? Can I stop focusing on the little disappointments and see the big joy more clearly? This season, I'm thinking of the Christmas story in a similar way. It is, after all, another yearly sign of sorts, a gift even. Some of us find in the story simple joy at the birth of a Savior. Some of us experience joy in hearing about shepherds and magi and a birth in a stable, mostly because the story has been a part of our lives for as long as we can remember, even as we are maybe no longer sure what meaning it might hold for us today. And then there are those of us somewhere in between who may question the literal truth of the story, but who find joy in translating it nonetheless. Who since there is in this ancient and much-loved tale perhaps a deeper truth that speaks to our own experiences of life. Because we do understand, after all, what it is like to be weary travelers, making our way through a less than ideal world, trying to find a place where the holy can be born, having to settle for less than ideal accommodations for that holy, and yet they surprisingly suffice. How many times have our expectations of life been betrayed by the circumstances in which we have found ourselves? Hasn't each of us, in our ways, felt like we were in search of a place to rest from the burdens we have been carrying, only to be told there is no room for us? And so, we have had to make do with where we are and who we are. We've had to make the best of what life hands us. And even when things may have seemed most bleak, when we have been most tired, most unsure of where we can find peace, the most unlikely of places becomes what we most need. Suddenly, room is made, our hearts open in love, and the holy is born. Before long, there are visitors we did not expect, bearing gifts we may not understand, at least not yet, and the divinity of our common life emerges yet again and shines like a star for those who share our yearning for comfort, for meaning, for the holy promise that can emerge from our lives together. The holy promise brought about when we live prioritizing our relationships with one another. When we understand that each night a child is born is a holy night, and that each person was once one of those holy children, no matter their background, their gender, or their race, or their politics, or their religion, or their appreciation for big wooden joy signs. The holy promise brought about when we come to see that the joy that matters most is not the joy that arrives when we have our needs met in exactly the way we think they should be, but the joy that grows from our dedication to seek to respect and care for those we love, and to always be expanding that circle of loving. No matter how you have come to this service tonight, whether you have come cloaked in your confusion and your despair, whether you have come draped with happy memories and of buoyant realities, or whether you have come dressed, metaphorically speaking, as Batman, rest assured, there is place for you at the stable that is our beloved human community. There is room for all of us who choose to live as though love is the most important value. For when we do, when we live as if love is our most important value, the holy can indeed be born, and even the darkest night will be illumined by the glow.